Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Today we will take up pollination. The transfer of or the process of transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigmatic surface of a carpel to the stigma of a carpel is called pollination. The pollination is simply the process of transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of a carpel is called pollination. This pollination, it is a characteristic of gymnosperms and angiosperms only. Out of the various groups of plants, that is algae, bryophyta, pteridophyta, gymnosperms and angiosperms, this pollination, it is the characteristic of gymnosperms and angiosperms only. Now this pollination, it is of two types: self-pollination and cross-pollination. Self-pollination and cross-pollination. Now we will take first self-pollination. The transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the same flower or another flower born on the same plant, it is called self-pollination. In the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the same flower or another flower born on the same plant is called self-pollination. The transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the same flower or another flower born on the same plant is called self-pollination. That means it is the pollination within the plant. Pollination within the plant is called self-pollination. And if either the pollen grains of a flower pollinates its own stigma, or the pollen grains of one flower pollinate the stigma of another flower born on the same plant, both these are called as self-pollination. Now the self-pollination, it is further of two types, as we have seen. Either the pollination takes place within the flower or between the flowers born on the same plant. Accordingly, we have two types of self-pollination. That's autogamy and geitonogamy. And that type of self-pollination, which involves the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the same flower, is called autogamy. And it is the pollination within the flower. If the pollination takes place within the flower, that is, pollen grains of a flower pollinates the stigma of the same flower, it is called autogamy. And if the pollen grains of a flower pollinates its own stigma, it is called autogamy. Now geitonogamy. If the pollen grains of a flower pollinates the stigma of another flower born on the same plant, that is called geitonogamy. And if the pollen grains of a flower pollinates the stigma of another flower but they are born on the same plant, it is called geitonogamy. That means it is the pollination between the flowers of the same plant, or in other words we can say it is the pollination within the plant. And it is the pollination between two flowers born on the same plant. It is called geitonogamy. For example, we have maize. One most important example which shows geitonogamy, it is the maize. It is maize. And it is actually what we can say, it is the pollination within the plant, but it is a type of, when we will see, it is physically cross pollination, and it takes place between the flowers, but genetically it is self pollination, because it is between the flowers of the same plant, that it is within the plant. These are the types. Now, contrivances or adaptations are factors of self pollination. Contrivances adaptations are factors favoring or promoting self-pollination. And what are the factors, what are the adaptations, what are the contrivances which promote self-pollination? And there are various factors in the self-pollinating plants which favor this self-pollination. Generally, these factors, these adaptations, these contrivances, they have been divided into three categories. Number first, homogamy. Number second, cleistogamy. And number third is bud pollination. And we have three factors, three contrivances or three adaptations which promote self-pollination. The first is homogamy. If the anther and stigma of a flower pollinates at the same time, if the anther and stigma of a flower they mature at the same time, this becomes a factor, this becomes an adaptation which promotes self-pollination, And if anther and stigma of a flower they mature at the same time, it forces them, it promotes them to undergo self-pollination. It promotes self-pollination in them. For example, we have potato and sunflower. Two examples, potato and sunflower. In these plants, the pollen grains and stigma of a flower, the anther and stigma of a flower, they mature at the same time. So this factor is called homogamy, when both male and female gametes they mature at the same time. So it forces them, it promotes them to undergo self-pollination. Number second is cleistogamy. In some flowers or in some plants, flowers do not open. Flowers do not open even at maturity. And generally we see when a flower matures, it opens. It opens and keeps open. It is stigma and anther. It is male and female parts. But in some plants, flowers do not open even at maturity, but they remain closed. Such flowers are called cleistogamous flowers. Cleistogamous flowers. Cleistogamous flowers. So when the male and female, when the flower do not open, the male is not able to get transferred to other plant, and similarly female is not able to receive a male gamete from any other plant, pollen gamete from any other plant. That's means this cleistogamy, this closed nature of the flowers, this promotes self-pollination among them. And in the male of a flower, it is forced to undergo self-pollination. या सच force मिसिमा करना, यानी या सच promote मिस करा. It has to. The only way for it is to undergo self-pollination. It is not able to open. Male is not able to get transport to any other. Female is not able to receive any other. So the only way for them is to undergo self-pollination. And this way, this process is called calistogamy. And such flowers are called calistogamous flowers. And this type of pollination is called calistogamy. This type of pollination is called calistogamy. And the other flowers, normal flowers which open at maturity, they are called chasmogamous flowers or chasmogamous flowers. Only the normal flowers which open at maturity, which normally open at maturity, they are called chasmogamous flowers. Then we have two types of flowers, chasmogamous flowers and calistogamous flowers. In these calistogamous flowers, the only way of pollination is calistogamy. Number third type is bud pollination. That is, example of this calistogamy is groundnut. Groundnut is the example of this, and another example is that is oxalis. These are the examples of calistogamy. Now, bud pollination, it takes place in flowers in which the anthers and stigma mature before opening of the flower, before anthesis. And amar mans kya gasa use has anther and stigma, they mature at bud condition. And during the bud condition, when the flower is still in the form of a bud, when there is no anthesis, no opening of the flower, anther and stigma matures. So anther and stigma, they cannot wait till the opening of the flower, till anthesis. So the only way for them is to undergo self-pollination. That means in these flowers, pollination takes place in the bud condition, before the anthesis of the flower, before the opening of the flower, and this condition is called bud pollination. When pollination takes place during the bud condition, at the bud stage of the flower, because anther and stigma matures in the bud condition. In other flowers, we see that anther and stigma matures after opening, after the bud condition. The flower remains in bud condition only for some time. After that, it opens, it matures in the in this condition, that is not in bud condition. In these flowers, in which the flowers pollinate in the bud condition, this pollination, this factor is called bud pollination, and this has become another contrivance, another factor for this for the self pollination. The examples of bud pollination are wheat, rice, etc. And in wheat, rice, it is the bud pollination which takes place. Then the factor for self pollination is that is bud pollination. This is all for today. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.